Giving it.
Hello, I'm Martha Senator.
Having it to give.
And this is Listen and Be Heard on WPVM 103.7, the voices of Asheville.
Moving it around.
And I'm joined by Tony Robles. Are you there, Tony?
Yes, I am, Martha.
Good to have
Good
you.
to be here.
So, what are you reading?
Well, I've been reading Ron Rash's collection of short stories, particularly a short story called Blackberries in Winter, which is a beautiful story and a beautiful collection. I wanted to bring up that I was on social media, and I saw something that was very poignant. It said, "Live so that if your life turned into a book, Florida would ban it."
That's the thing these days, banning books.
Yeah, I read that Amanda Gorman, who was the young poet who read at President Biden's inaugural, her poem that she read was banned from a Miami-Dade County school. And so she posted something on Twitter about that. There's a list that PEN America has compiled on the different books that have been banned throughout the states, Florida among them. Texas seems like they banned every book under the sun.
Well, it seems a good time to remind people that just because a book has been banned by a particular library or wherever, it's not actually banned. Like, we are free to buy these books, read these books.
Yeah.
So let's not get too, not that we shouldn't be alarmed, because when people start banning even the probing of ideas, then we're really in trouble. But we should go ahead and read those books that some people think ought to be banned. There's authors complaining that one parent can have their book banned from a school, and that's kind of an unfortunate situation.
Yeah, I think that may have been the case with Amanda Gorman or another author. I think it was one parent that had issue with a book, and they ended up taking it off the shelves.
Well, Listen and Be Heard is a show for readers and writers, so I think that that's probably a matter of concern for a lot of our listeners, and people should speak up about it. They should be heard. I'm reading The Language of Trees, which looks, well, I haven't started reading it yet. One of my kids gave it to me for Mother's Day. It's called The Language of Trees, A Rewilding of Literature and Landscape by Katie Holton. But it actually has like a very long list of award-winning contributing writers from different generations: Jorge Luis Borges, Ross Gay, James Gleick. I'm just looking at the back cover, but it's something, Winona LaDuke. I'm really looking forward to reading this. Ursula Le Guin, but apparently she made a new kind of alphabet from like different kinds of trees. That's the best I can explain it. So I'm going to explain it better after I start reading it.
Language, you said The Language of Trees?
Yes.
Well, that's definitely speaking our language here at Listen and Be Heard, for sure.
Yes, it is. Well, I want to thank you for joining me, Tony. We're going to hear an interview from you later today with Beverly Parayno. And, being that it's Asian Pacific Islander Heritage Month as well, Wildflowers is a fantastic book. Just came out, deals with some really important themes and issues, and just look forward to that interview. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll be listening for that in a little while.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Living it is sewing a coat, investing each stitch with magic, creating a unique design, putting it on and wearing it the rest of your life. Living it is knowing that what you see, what you hear is
So what we're doing right now is I have a very special guest in the studio. Well, she's not in the studio. She's joining me by Zoom. And because I'm having some technical difficulties, I'm actually just miking my computer in order to be able to speak with her. So we're going to experiment with this online. Jill Hendrix is the owner of Fiction Addiction, which is an independent bookstore in Greenville, South Carolina. And it was originally a used bookstore, but over time the landscape changed, and now she specializes in new books. And being readers and writers, mostly listening to this show, which I think is most everybody on one level or another, I've invited Jill here to, speak about the book business a little, so that readers and writers can understand it a little better. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you, Martha.
I'm glad to have you here. I was wondering, well, first of all, maybe you could explain that journey a little bit from going to being a used bookstore to selling new books and why you wanted to do that.
Sure. I opened as a used bookstore because I capitalized it myself, and that was the easiest way to start. And at the time, there was a longtime independent bookstore in Greenville called the Open Book, and they were doing well. And then, over time, a chain came in, Barnes & Noble came in, Books A Million, and eventually the Open Book closed. And so right around the 2008 recession is when we kind of started carrying more new books and inheriting some of the author events that the Open Book had, put on. And so just over time, we shifted our model to more new books.
I see. And so as an independent bookstore owner, let's speak to readers first.
Sure.
Why? Well, I went to your website, first of all, and as soon as I get there, it's like a bookstore already. But why should people go to you? And what's the difference between you and, if I went to Amazon or if I wanted to go to actual bookstore, went to Barnes & Noble or something?
Sure. I think the main difference, between an independent bookstore and a chain bookstore is that the staff of independent bookstores tend to be bigger readers. They know their material better. They've had longer in the industry. They have, a great amount of knowledge. And our job, since our stores are usually smaller, is to highly curate. So we're offering the best of the best and things that we think will be specifically geared to our customers. We can always special order anything, the customer is looking for, but what we are ordering into stock tend to be things that we have read, other booksellers we trust have read, and that we really feel are going to be special and something you might not encounter at a big bookstore, or it's there, but you don't notice it because it's just buried on the shelf.
Now, of course, if somebody's looking for a specific book, you can always order that book for them, right?
Yes. And on our website, you can place that order and have it shipped directly to you. We do that through the distributor, and every book in print, they can ship it directly to you.
Okay. So now that kind of brings me to talking about writers a little bit, because there's a lot of writers now who self-publish. And I think for those of us who have done that or who are contemplating it, that world of distributors is a big, murky shadow that is hard to figure out and often stymies independent writers who publish themselves from being in a bookstore like yours. So can you explain a little how the distribution to bookshops work and why that might be an issue for writers?
Sure. So the main wholesaler is known as Ingram, and self-published authors can publish through them with their Ingram Spark program. Once you're in their catalog, we can order your books into the bookstore. They're one of our regular distributors that we deal with all the time. Now, if you're doing author events, it's a little bit tricky because a lot of times the authors set their books as non-returnable in that system,
right,
which is not helpful for events. And then Ingram charges a restocking fee.
So those are things that will make you think twice.
Well, it's like, we can stock the book from Ingram, but if we're going to do an event with the author, we'd probably prefer to work with them directly on a consignment basis.
Because if they don't sell all the books, you can't return them, and you might have trouble selling them yourself.
Yes.
Okay. So having said that, are there ways that you like to work with independent authors, or do you prefer to just work with, publishers of big-time books, and you have authors touring through, or how does that kind of work? Like, how do you both select the books and the events for your store?
Sure. So we do work with local self-published authors. We give priority to authors that live in our area. And it doesn't matter if they're in Ingram, we will stock them on a consignment basis. But it is tricky to have to deal with all of these little small vendors. So we do charge a fee for that, just to get you in our system and, cut you checks every quarter and stuff like that.
You charge a fee to stock the book?
Yeah.
I see. And then, so if they want to then, have an event at your store, what would that involve?
Sure. So there's also a fee for an event, but we don't charge you both of those. If you're going to have an event, you get the stocking for free.
I see. Okay.
But we do a lot of events with local authors all the time. We can either do a straight signing in the store. We can do more of a launch event where you can bring in food and drink. Just depends on what you're looking for.
Now, it seems to me probably for 20, maybe even 30 years now, I've been hearing about the death of the independent bookstore. When Barnes & Noble and Amazon and things like that came along. And yet, there are independent bookstores in most cities that I've been to, small and large. What do you say about that, and what are some of the challenges that you're facing?
Yeah. So there are a lot of people very interested in opening bookstores. It's a dream that never dies, right? And, even during COVID, we saw all sorts of people opening bookstores. What the industry is trying to figure out now is how to keep a bookstore sustainable so that, the owner can retire and sell the bookstore or bring in staff to manage it. And that part has been a little bit trickier.
I see. And how many years has you've been here for quite a while now?
Yes, we're 22 years.
Okay, so when you say that's trickier, being viable is tricky, like being able to retire, like you said.
Well, I think what's tricky is it seems like every time we're starting to build up to a level where we can, have some savings and invest more in the store, something happens, right? This is like, the third or fourth recession my store has been through. We had 9/11, we had 2008, we had COVID, we had this post-COVID maybe recession. Yeah.
Right. So how do you, I would imagine that the books you choose has a big role to play in that. I mean, if you're, are there particular genres or things that are selling that are kind of keep your business going, and how do you maybe balance that with more literary things that you might prefer? Or I'm assuming that the more literary things aren't selling as well as maybe some teen series about wolves or something, but maybe you could break that down for me.
Well, I mean, genre fiction does tend to sell really well for us, but it's also what I and my staff read, so that may be part of it. We definitely have customers who love literary fiction, and we stock a selection of that, but it's not my personal favorite. About the most literate I get is Ron Rash, like you were mentioning earlier. Okay. So if it's Southern literary, I can do it.
Oh, okay. We have some prejudice for Southern literature. That's good. Yeah. You're a Southern bookshop. That's appropriate. So I wonder, like, if you would say to a writer starting out, now there's some writers who they're just going to write what they're going to write, whether it's going to sell or not. But what would you say is like the best-selling genres for somebody who's looking for that kind of publishing success?
Well, what's tricky is that it takes a long time to write a book and then get it published. And by then, the hot genres will have switched.
Uh-huh. Now, that's a little discouraging.
Now, it goes in waves, right? So right now, police procedurals are not very popular. It's cozy mysteries and amateur detectives, But give it another 2 or 3 years, and maybe the police procedural will have a comeback.
So you have to be a fast writer, too, to keep up with the market. Now, you mentioned that you do have events at the store. What's coming up?
Sure. So we have a couple of events coming up in the store. On June 8th, we're having a cookbook signing with Cynthia Grobart. So if anybody's a gardener and you've ever gotten overwhelmed by zucchini, this is the event for you. Her book is Zucchini Love, so what to do with all of that zucchini. And then if you're a science fiction fan, we're going to have David Weber and Jacob Holo for a talk on June 16th. And I'm working on more events. We cross your fingers. We may have Ron Rash in the fall, but that's not finalized.
Okay, well, we'll all cross our fingers for that one. And maybe we'll try to come and cover it if he shows up. How can people find your store? How can they find your website?
Sure. Well, let me start with our website. It's www.fiction-addiction.com. And if you're in Greenville, we're on Woods Crossing Road. We're behind Haywood Mall in the shops with Fried Green Tomatoes, Boardwalk, and Jimmy John's.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. Was there anything else that you would like to share with readers and writers today?
No, just that we enjoy your support. We couldn't exist without you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jill, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Martha Senator. This is Listen and Be Heard, and we're going to listen to a little spoken word now from Edwin Torres.
In both TP, the physical, and TA, the abstract, the IBS, in between space, is AC, a construct. Taking MFAS, many forms and shapes. DOS, drawing or speaking, is a MOSS, medium of shape-shifting. Ideas of ODAE, openness, distance, and entry, seem ITIN, inherent to its nature. For some, TIB, the in-between, is a COE, collection of essences, or PMTO, prosthetic memories that overlap. AOC, audience or canvas. For others, a NI, new invention, a FISOB, fabricated and implied space of being. Tip! Da! Ipsac! Fas! Dos! Mos! Odai! GAOA. Geometry and illusions of architecture also appear as ASS, oral spatial systems, whereas BTIB, between the in-between, explores TRB, the relationship between. ECSN, existing and constructed spaces and narratives that are shifted, disoriented, and in constant flux. SDICF, FISO is interested in TUOE, the uncertainty of expressing. It's WOBP, way of being present, without MDFC making demands for completion. Stick. FISOB. TUOE. Wobop. Motherfucker.
The rue survived, the rue and the bitter hyssop. Remembered sorrow can survive the bitterest cold. But the lovely lemon thyme lost its life in the stone-hard ground, its delicate roots shriveled for lack of warmth. Some of the herbs are coming back. Hardy horehound, lemon balm, and the astringent bee balm, that western bergamot whose faintly medicinal fragrance Mormon ladies used to scent their handkerchief boxes. Schooled in hardship, it drove its roots deep underground and waited out the winter. Now toughened and durable, it makes its way to the sun. Stray tendrils of mint wandering from their beds, battening on earthworm castings, smothered the sage. Mint is fine on lamb, but it takes the pungency of sage to give any flavor to an Albertson turkey. Nothing can stop the time. Never say the time must have a stop. The tansy is shouting hallelujahs of joy for Easter coming, and of course jonquils and crocuses and grape hyacinths never have given a damn. Cold snow or warm rain, spring is spring, and damn the elements, full speed ahead. And it's early yet. Some roots may still be asleep, warm and safe and lazy, waiting for May or June, or maybe the second coming.
Mama is come back, yeah. Yeah. She said, yeah, yo. Yeah, yo. She said, yeah, yo. Yeah, yo. Apu. Say.
Par le soir, les boulevards devant mon miroir, profile-toi, car j'y vise mon gars. Assise peinard, je me sens fatiguée, je me glace en balèze, balaise, punaise, mon attention, couvrir du blé, foutaise, blase et blâme, et puis blablabla. Je me révise mon coup de poignard, devant mon regard, zappe ma main, je prends ma part, bout de départ. She say, yayo, 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 she say, yayo, 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 she say. Wapi mama, wapi mama. celles qui veulent du nickel. Écoute ces détails, même si tu coupes la vie, travaille des batailles, pas besoin de médailles pour que ton travail aille. Tu t'es connecté, le rythme est lancé, plus besoin de penser, c'est à ton il y a des bruits rythmiques, du tribal et techniques, puis des sons métalliques, faut trouver la technique. Buddy, c'est yayo, she say, yayo, she say, yeah, yayo, 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 she say, yayo, yayo. Deke kwenda wapi mama, wapi mama. Deke kwenda wapi mama, wapi mama. Betu banana nge, betu banana. Betu banana nge, betu banana. Plus de 1000, plus de billes, tape subtil et utile, tape au mobile, pas facile, fini la bisbille. Amazon nous les filles, misons sur la face à pile, dans ta cagnotte, note, pique ton plot, un complot avec elle, cote, détache tes menottes, nota, bene, fils, son fils, chante, she say, she say, black Audi, she say, universe. She say, wapi mama. She say, daka kwenda wapi mama, wapi mama. Beke kwenda wapi mama, wapi mama. Betu banana nge, betu banana. Betu banana nge, betu banana. Kula sa betu be, betu banana. Kula sa betu be, betu banana. Wapi mama, wapi mama, wapi mama, wapi mama, wapi mama.
That was another cut from Zap Mama. I was playing them last week, and I'm just into it. So that was called Wapi Mama from Zap Mama CD called Amazon or Amazon. I'm not sure how they would pronounce that. And before that was a cut from the wonderful storyteller Rosalie Sorrell, who I had the pleasure to hear and share the stage with once a long time ago at the New Eurekan Poets Cafe. This is a CD called Report from Grimes Creek, and the cut we heard was A Clearing in the Forest. And then before that, we heard from Edwin Torres, who will be my live guest next week from New York. He sent me a couple short pieces for me to be able to play to give you a taste this week. So I might still play one more. That was called To Name the Drawing. And he did that with a musician from Barcelona who, well, he goes by the name Encadi Renversé dans l'herbe. Now, I know I totally murdered that, but he takes Edwin's audio files and relayers, edits them, adding his own music and soundscapes and creating some super sub-level listening. That's how Edwin described it. So this is Listen and Be Heard. My name is Martha Sinider, and this is WPVM Radio 103.7 in Asheville, North Carolina. We're going to go now to a interview that Tony Robles did with Beverly Parayno.
Hey, thank you, Martha, and welcome to Listen and Be Heard Radio on WPVM 103.7 FM, the voice of Asheville. Very excited today about today's guest. another author with a wonderful new book that's just come out. Beverly Parayno is author of the new short story collection, Wildflowers. Now, Beverly was born in East San Jose, California, by immigrant parents from the Philippines. Her fiction, memoir, and essays and author interviews have been in Narrative Magazine, Bellingham Review, The Rumpus, Warscapes, and Southward, New Writing from Ireland. Her work has been translated into Mandarin and published by World Literature, a journal of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences. And, in reading her biography, it's fascinating. There's one other fascinating thing about Beverly is that she is an animal communicator, and we will talk to her a little bit about that. She lives in Cameron Park, California, which is close to Sacramento. Beverly, welcome to Listen and Be Heard.
Thank you, Tony.
Congratulations on your book. I want to start off with place. Place and setting is so important to writers and how they craft their stories. Now, you're from San Jose, East San Jose, California. Can you talk about East San Jose and how it shaped you as a writer and an artist?
Yeah, we actually, my parents are immigrants from the Philippines, and my dad was able to come over through joining the U.S. Navy in Manila. And so that's kind of how our family came over when he got stationed in Alameda. I was born in Alameda. And my parents wanted to, I guess, move to the suburbs and have more space for us to grow up. And we had known a few families from my dad's hometown, Urdaneta, Pangasinan, who were living in San Jose. So that's how we ended up in San Jose. And I have to say that I was so relieved when I got to my elementary school in San Jose, because my experience in the early years, kindergarten, first grade, Alameda at the time was very, very white. My sisters and I were the only people of color in the school besides one African-American girl. And, we experienced racism and discrimination. I had a very racist teacher who actually questioned my broken English and used to pin a note on my shirt saying, "Teach your daughter English." And I would walk home every day sort of pushing the note out of my face, basically. So moving to San Jose was, I just couldn't believe how many people of color I saw when I walked into my new room at my new school. There were Filipinos, Japanese, Chinese, there were Mexicans. It just was completely diverse. So I'm really grateful for growing up and moving to San Jose and growing up around so many different races and ethnicities. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Go right ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, and I was just going to say, when we moved from one part of San Jose up to the foothills to another part of San Jose when I was in 5th or 6th grade, that neighborhood in the sort of Quimby area was heavily Filipino. I think it's like every other house in the tract housing was a Filipino family.
Wow. So, it's like a night and day compared to Alameda. And your father was in the Navy, is that correct? Military, and that's how you were in in Alameda.
He joined in 1954 in Manila at the time when the Philippines was allowing Filipinos to enlist only in the Navy, not in the other armed forces.
Okay. Your book, Wildflowers, in reading the short stories that are really lovely. It's a very vast landscape of many themes. And I was able to pick out a few. Vulnerability, a sense of powerlessness, family, displacement, transformation, some superstition, the definition of home. Can you describe those themes and how they converge in your book to give us a sense of a particular world, your world?
Yeah, so I think that, well, the first thing I want to say is, as a writer, I don't really set out to write about themes. I set out to write about people and the characters and the story and the situations, and the themes emerge from the story. So it's sort of after I write a story that it's like, oh, this theme is emerging, or that, trauma is emerging, or intergenerational trauma or racism is emerging. So it's sort of an organic process as these themes emerge. But I think, a lot of my stories are autofiction. A lot of them are based on personal experiences, although they are fiction. So I do take a lot of liberties. So, for example, the first story, Savior, is set in San Jose, where I grew up. And there is, grandparents in the house who recently immigrated from the Philippines. There's a lot of tension in the home. There's two parents just trying to sort of stay afloat financially. They're recent immigrants as well. And as a result of immigration and 3 generations in the house, financial insecurity, and just, the father's history of violence and domestic violence and corporal punishment growing up in the Philippines, both from family and as well as the education system. There's violence, in the house. So the narrator of that story is a young girl, 10 years old, who's sort of just trying to navigate this world with a violent father and a submissive mother and grandparents who basically can't really help in terms of stopping the abuse in the house.
There was a story, talking about home, because, you have immigrants and then you have first, second generations. And yet the immigrants are kind of caught between two worlds. You have a very powerful story in the book. It's called Balikbayan. And it really reminded me of a story that the Filipino-American writer Oscar Peñaranda wrote. It was called The Price. And your story, Balikbayan, it's really about an ancestral home and, letting go of an ancestral home, selling it, going back to the Philippines and selling it. But to the main character, it was almost like selling a piece of their memory, of their history, of their soul. Can you tell, our listeners, our WPVM listeners who may not be familiar with the term Balikbayan, if you can tell them what Balikbayan is, and just maybe a little bit about that short story, because it was very powerful.
Thank you. So Balikbayan is basically a Filipino in the diaspora coming home to the Philippines. And so, that story is, I have to say that it's always challenging for me to set a story in the Philippines. I'm American born. I'm the first in my family to be born in America. I have only been to the Philippines twice, both times as an adult. And so I'm always a little bit challenged setting a story there and not entirely comfortable, but I do it anyway just to challenge myself. So I think about 4 of the 9 stories in my collection, Wildflowers, are set in the Philippines. And so this one in particular, I really wanted to have a protagonist who is very American, had never been to the Philippines. This particular protagonist was born there, but came to America very early, so has no memories of the Philippines and is just very, very American. And when she has to escort her father and her stepmother back because they're elderly and they need help and they want to sell land, knowing that they're aging and probably won't be able to go back to the Philippines again. she's very hesitant. She doesn't want to go. She doesn't like her dad. She doesn't like her stepmother. She only really knows about the Philippines through what you see on the news, poverty and violence and, Duterte and these
kidnappings and things like
kidnappings
that.
and assassinations and killings. And so she doesn't want to go. So it's, she has no choice. Her siblings can't go. So that's kind of the premise of the story is someone who's very reluctant going back to their home country.
Yeah. And, I think for a lot of Phil-Ams or Filipino Americans, if you will, we can relate to that because many of us have maybe only been to the Philippines once or twice, if at all. And once we get there, we start to see things in a different way. It's almost like, it's a homecoming, but it's a spiritual homecoming and journey. Mm. And I think the story is, Balikbayan is very telling. I think it would resonate with a lot of immigrant families.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Because I think anyone who has the interest and the ability to travel to their home country, if they're American and have never been, I mean, I know not everyone is able to, but if that interest is there and there's a way to do it, I think it could be very powerful, especially for, first generation, immigrant children. It's, things just make sense. Things start to click into place. It's like, oh, this is why mom and dad do this. Everyone does it here. So just the things for me started to really make sense. And I started also to see my parents as, like full dimensional people, three-dimensional people who had a childhood and a adolescence and a young adult experience before they even came to the U.S. So, yeah, I think it's an important trip to make.
You have a story that is set in Ireland, and I know from your biography that you studied in Cork, in Ireland.
Yeah.
Can you talk about it's very interesting. If you could talk about your experience as a Filipino American writer or student of writing, living and studying in Ireland. What was it that brought you there?
I always had a pull for the place, and I don't know why, except around this supernatural connection, because I grew up in a very superstitious family. I grew up in a family of healers. I myself am, an animal communicator. My mom was a healer. Is a healer. My grandfather was a town Abalario. He was also the Ghostbuster. His grandfather was a healer. So I just have that along my maternal line. And, just grew up with so much superstition in the house that the minute I saw that in an Irish story, I just thought Philippines and Ireland have this connection through superstition.
That's beautiful because you don't really hear that. There's a powerful scene in Savior where the grandfather tries to lessen some of the pain that the young girl is going through. And that was part of his I guess his calling as a healer.
Yeah.
I think that's an underlying thread, a constant thread in these stories where you have somebody that doesn't quite feel that things are right and is confronted with it and then comes out the other side with a different perspective. And for the reader, I think it really resonates how, another theme, I guess, in these stories, common thread is transformation, transformation from trauma, transformation from, just feeling like the odd person out, and growing from that. we are going to have to wrap up, but I don't want to wrap up before asking you about the animal communication. If you
Sure.
want to, if you want to give a plug out for that, that's fine. Go right ahead.
So I come from a line of healers. I always felt that my intuition was fairly strong, and I've had sort of instances in my life where I did feel like some higher power was speaking to me. So in 2018, I took it upon myself to take my first animal communication class. And it turns out I'm very natural at it. And so basically it's telepathic communication with animals. And it's not just dogs and cats. I've talked to horses and rabbits and birds. I also talk to nature, lakes, the ocean, trees, basically anything that is alive. And trust me, I understand it sounds completely crazy. But telepathic communication is real. We all have it. We just have learned not to cultivate it in our culture. But it's something that's innate. And again, like we all have it, maybe some stronger than others.
And you've been able to help people. I mean, there are people that have had issues with their dogs and cats or what have you. And you've been able to communicate with them and help find a solution, or at least better a situation where an animal, was unhappy, and you got a chance to, figure out why. Again, Beverly, thank you so much for being on our program, Listen and Be Heard Radio. Now, your book launch is happening on Saturday, May the 27th, in San Francisco. Is that correct? And the book is published by PAWA. PAWA stands for Philippine American Artists and Filipino American Writers and Artists. And it's going to be at the Philippine Center. Is that correct?
Yeah, PAWA Press is actually, so PAWA is the organization. It's a literary organization and indie press promoting Filipinx writers. And we are the producer. I'm on the board of PAWA, and we produce the Filipino American International Book Festival, the largest book festival in the U.S. dedicated to Filipinx writers. And PAWA Press is our imprint. And so I'm very proud to be a PAWA Press author. And yes, we're going to have a celebration on Saturday, May 27th, 2:00. Come through. It's going to be at Centro Filipino, 814 Market Street. And there's going to be 6 readers, wonderful readers, sharing the mic with me, and lots of food and wine. And yeah, it's not going to be a stuffy event. It's going to be a celebration.
For sure. And for those folks that aren't able to fly to San Francisco from Asheville, can you tell them how to get your book?
Yes, please go to Wildflowers BP, as in Beverly Parayno, wildflowersbp.com.
Fantastic. Again, Beverly Parayno, Beverly Parayno. It's spelled Parayno. Author of the brand new book of short stories, Wildflowers, animal communicator extraordinaire. Thank you so much for being on our program today. And again, thank you so much for listening. We're going to toss it back to Martha in the studio. And thank you for listening to WPVM 103.7 FM, the voice of Asheville.
They expected something bigger, and they were expecting something different, and they were left with parts of words, and they were expected to leave with words, so they left disappointed, without expectation, so they left disappointed, so they were disappointed, so they left without the others. When the others were left out, in the way they were left disappointed. And so he took out parts of words, and so the parts he left in. And so he took parts of what he left in, and so he pointed at the others. And so they expected all the others, and so they pointed at the parts, and made the others all of them, using parts that didn't disappoint him, and made others be the point, using parts of what he left in, to be the parts that didn't point at them, that didn't disappoint them. And so the part he left in, and they left in all the parts, and they expected disappointing things to leave them. And he stood there, and he left in, and he took what left him expecting, of what others didn't point at. So they pointed, while they pointed, what they pointed, and expected disappointment, and they left him. And he expected something bigger, and he took their disappointment, and the parts he didn't take, and they expected something bigger, and you expect disappointment as something bigger than it was, left for someone's disappointment. When the pointing was expected, when you leave what you expect, and you expect, and you leave, and you point. All the parts you fit, to all the parts you make, to all the parts you want, to all the parts you take.
This is Listen and Be Heard, and I'm Martha Senator. And that last cut you heard was another one from Edwin Torres. It's called Compromise. And I'm so excited that he's going to be my guest next week. He's one of my all-time favorite spoken word performers. But he's also a published author of several books of poetry and a graphic artist. And he's going to be teaching a virtual workshop. And that's why I've invited him to join me next week, because maybe you want to, tune in or drink up some of that special juice he's got, because he's really quite a unique and interesting performer and writer. So I'm really excited that he's going to be coming. I'm also excited to announce that we're going to go to a 2-hour format starting next week. We will be going from 3 to 5 p.m. on WPVM. So there'll be more to listen to, and hopefully I'm going to hear more from who's listening as well, which I would really like. We would really like at Listen and Be Heard. I want to thank Tony Robles for his contributions and invite you to query me and participate and contribute. If there's writers who you're interested in speaking to and you think ought to be on this show, send me an email at editor@listenandbeheard.net and ask me about it. Let's talk about it. Or just call me. Well, don't call me. I'm not going to put my phone number out there right now. But I do want to hear from you. And the way to do that is to go to listenandbeheard.net, not only to get in touch, but also because a lot of these interviews, like the one you just heard with Tony and Beverly. That's like the edited 20-minute version. So a lot of these interviews we're doing as Zoom interviews that are recorded, so there's video, and we post those at listenandbeheard.net unedited. So it might have been 20 minutes on this show. This show gets, if you would like to hear this show again, it also gets rebroadcast or repackaged as a podcast. So it's the Listen and Be Heard podcast, which you can go to anywhere that you like to listen to podcasts, and you can re-listen to this show again that way, or tell your friends about it. Or also, I want to encourage you to download the great WPVM app that spent much time developing around here, thanks to Davian Dial and her crew of volunteers and engineers and producers here at WPVM, which I'm so grateful and proud to be a part of. Next week also, Tony will be speaking with his mother, who is a professional in the writing business. We're trying to look at writing and reading from a lot of different angles, and what she does is work with people who want to write a book but who may not actually be, professional writers. So you might call that a ghostwriter or a developer, but we'll hear more about all of that next week with Tony. And until then, I want to thank you for listening, and I want to thank you for the opportunity to be heard.
Living it is. Giving it. Having it to give. Taking it, moving it around. Living it, giving it, having it, taking it, moving it, shaking it, creating, loving it. Living it is loving it. Living it is sewing a coat, investing each stitch with magic, creating a unique design, putting it on and wearing it the rest of your life. Living it is knowing that what you see, what you hear is tangible. It's being a rock in the river and being the river too. It's hearing, you'll never be able to do that. Living it is knowing you will do it. It's speaking the unspoken. It's thinking the unthinkable. It's doing the unexpected. It's quitting before you get fired.